Okay, let's start talking about quadrilaterals. There's several of them, and they have several specific characteristics that we need to spend some time talking about so that you know how to set up and solve problems involving our quadrilaterals. Well, here is a picture of the quadrilateral family tree. We're going to, in this video, concentrate on the parallelogram side of this family tree. We're going to start looking at these. And so what you need to think about with this family tree is, think of, with a family tree, passing down characteristics. So we're going to start with the parallelogram. Parallelograms' characteristics are passed down to the rhombus and the rectangle. So yes, they have all the same characteristics to start with, but then they each have some new characteristics of their own. Then once we get to the square, if you look at that one, the square has characteristics of the parallelogram, rhombus, and rectangle all combined together, but the square doesn't have anything new on its own, okay? Then in the next video, we'll talk about the trapezoid and kite side of it. So let's go to the page in your notebook that talks about parallelograms. So we're going to start with that. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to draw a picture of a parallelogram. Parallelogram is just a rectangle. It looks like a rectangle that's been pushed over, that's slanted. It's kind of the easy way to start. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about all the different characteristics involving the side lengths, involving the angles, and then the diagonals, and making sure you understand how to set those equations up if I gave you different scenarios. So the first thing we're going to look at is the sides. And in a parallelogram, we know that the sides, the opposite sides, are parallel. So go ahead and stick some arrows there. Arrows mean parallel. Notice I'm putting a double arrow here to show that they're not all the same. So the first thing we're going to say is opposite sides are parallel. There's not a whole lot of questions unless I give you a graph about that, and you could use slope to prove and make sure that the lines are parallel. The next thing that we're going to look at with parallelograms is that your opposite sides are congruent. So this side here that I just put a tick mark is opposite of this side, so those two are congruent. Same thing on the other side. So both sets are congruent, so opposite sides are congruent. And go ahead over here to the side, put part equals part to know that if you know one side and you know the other side, you can set them equal to each other to solve an equation. Okay, next thing we're going to look at are the angle measures. So the first thing that I want you to know about that is that opposite angles are congruent. So what I mean by that is this one here in blue is congruent here. And the other set of opposite angles are also congruent. So go ahead and double arc those. And let's write that down here. So opposite angles are congruent. Again, if things are congruent, you would set part equals part. Go ahead and put that there. The other characteristic about angles in a parallelogram is that your consecutive angles are supplementary. They're going to add up to 180 degrees. And by supplementary, I mean this angle here and that angle there. Okay, so let me put some numbers here just so it makes a little bit more sense. Angle 1, angle 2, angle 3, and angle 4. Well, our first characteristic, we said 1 and 3 are congruent, 2 and 4 are congruent. But the new characteristic, if we said consecutive, 3 and 4 are consecutive, so they would add up to 180. 1 and 4 are consecutive, they add up to 180. 1 and 2 are consecutive, they would add up to 180. And so are 2 and 3. So kind of going around the figure are all your different consecutive angles. Okay. We'll write that down. And go ahead in parentheses, let's put our equation that we know for supplementary. So part plus part equals 180. And the last thing that we're going to talk about with parallelograms are the diagonals. So go ahead and draw those diagonals. diagonals are not congruent, but they do bisect each other. Remember, bisect means cut in half. So we know that this piece right here is congruent to that piece, the 3's. And this piece right here is congruent to that piece. Notice I put the 3 and the 4 tick mark because I'd already used the 1 and the 2 on the outsides, and I didn't want you to think any of those are congruent. So down here under diagonals, let's say that diagonals bisect. And when we say bisect, it means it cuts in half, so they're congruent. So we would also use part equals part. All right, so parallelogram has 5 characteristics, and I'm going to stick that up here at the top just to remind myself there are 5 characteristics for every parallelogram. Now remember, I said the parallelogram is going to pass down its characteristics. So when we now go to our rectangle section, we are going to bring all 5 of those characteristics plus a few new ones on its own. So let's go ahead and go to the rectangle section, and let's go and draw our picture. Okay, let's go ahead and put those 5 characteristics that we know it has because the parallelogram passed down his characteristics to the rectangle. So we said that side lengths, opposite sides are parallel. So let's go ahead and add that there. And opposite sides are congruent. Okay, so let's write that down. And they're congruent. And if they're congruent, it still works like this, part equals part. Okay, that's all there is to side lengths. Nothing new there. Angles, let's go back and add those characteristics from the parallelogram. We know opposite angles are congruent. But what else do you know about the angles in a rectangle? That they are 90 degrees. So yes, not only are they congruent, but they also equal 90 degrees. So go ahead and put your right angle symbol there. Same thing with consecutives. They add up to 180. So I'm going to go right here with these just to remind myself that I do have that characteristic that my consecutives add up to 180. So let's jot down our angle characteristics. Let's start with what was passed down. Opposite angles are congruent. We know that that's part equals part. Doubt you'll see many questions on that with a rectangle because the angles do equal 90 degrees. And our other passed down characteristic was that consecutive angles add up to 180. And we said earlier that that equation was part plus part equals 180 degrees. Okay, let's talk about the diagonals. Let's go ahead and draw those in. We know that based on the parallelogram, that the diagonals do bisect each other, but in a rectangle, the diagonals are actually congruent. So when we go to make our tick marks for the bisecting part, we can actually mark them all with 3's because they are the same. Okay, so let's jot down those characteristics. The diagonals bisect each other. Our passed down characteristic, and the diagonals are congruent. Which means if they're congruent, we would set up part equals part. So we count, we have 7 characteristics here. So we had the 5 brought over from the parallelogram, plus 2 more, the angles are 9 degrees, and the diagonals are congruent to make it a rectangle. All right, now let's go to a rhombus. With a rhombus, we start with those 5 characteristics again passed down from the parallelogram. So let's go ahead and draw a rhombus. Our rhombus kind of looks like a diamond or a square that's been slanted. You know what, let me do that better with my straight edge tool here for you. Okay. Okay, so let's start with the sides. Pass down characteristics. Opposite sides are parallel. Opposite sides are also congruent, but with a rhombus, a new characteristic is that all the sides are congruent. So yes, opposite sides are congruent, but they're all congruent here. So let's go ahead and write those down. Opposite sides are parallel. Opposite sides are congruent. And again, we know part equals part. But then we get to add in our third characteristic here that all the sides are congruent. And so if you want to go ahead and put part equals part on that one, go for it. Okay, let's look at our angle characteristics. We know our passed down characteristics are that the opposite angles are congruent, so those two are congruent, and these two are congruent. And our consecutives are supplementary, so they add up to 180. And that's all there is for a rhombus. There's nothing new about an angle for a rhombus, so we can just write those down. Opposite angles are congruent. Part equals part if need be, and consecutive angles add up to 180. And we'll put part plus part equals 180. Okay, now let's talk about diagonals. Here's where a lot of our new parts come into play here. We know that a parallelogram passed down the characteristic that the diagonals do bisect each other. So let's go ahead and draw those diagonals in. You can see that they're not congruent. So if they're bisecting, we know we can put actually just 2 because all sides were congruent. We could put 3 here. Another characteristic is that the diagonals are perpendicular. So we do have a right angle here, which means that I could ask a question about a right triangle. And I'm going to highlight, but then I'm going to erase it. So if you look here, there's a right triangle. So all the properties that we just talked about the last several weeks with right triangles could come into play here with these diagonals, okay? The last thing is that the diagonals actually do bisect your opposite angles. So let's put an example here. Let's say the whole thing is one of these angles here in the bottom left corner is 50 degrees. Then this angle would be 25 degrees and this angle would be 25 degrees. They bisect the angles. If you want another one here, let's say the one in the bottom right, let's say that's 50, so it's got to be 130. So 65. Okay, so let's jot all that down right here. We know the diagonals bisect each other. They are perpendicular. So let's go ahead and put right angle there just to remind yourself. And they bisect the opposite angles. And we know bisect means cut in half. So the diagonals are cut in half and the angles have been cut in half by those diagonals. All right, so we started with 5. We added 3 new characteristics for a rhombus based from a parallelogram. All sides are congruent, the diagonals bisect, and the angles, and they're perpendicular. So we have 8 characteristics total for a rhombus. Okay, last one in the parallelogram side of things, and that is a square. Square doesn't have anything new. It has all the characteristics of a parallelogram. It has all the new characteristics from a rectangle, which was 2. It has all the characteristics from a rhombus, which was 3. So that's a total of 10 characteristics for a square. Nothing new for a square. So let's go ahead and draw that. Okay, let's think about anything we've talked about with side lengths. So the first thing we talked about is that the opposite sides were parallel. We said opposite sides were congruent based on the parallelogram, but remember rhombus, all sides were congruent. So we can kind of combine those into one. So let's go ahead and write all that down. Opposite sides congruent. Opposite sides are parallel. And all sides are congruent. Remember, when you have a congruent symbol, we're probably going to be using part equals part. Okay, let's talk about angles for a minute. So let's think about parallelogram first. With a parallelogram, we knew that opposite angles were congruent, but because of a rectangle, we know that they were all actually 90 degrees. So let's go ahead and put our right angle symbols there. Combines both of those characteristics into one. And we have our consecutives. So that's all we know about the angles. So let's go ahead and jot all that down. Opposite angles are congruent. We know that the angles equal 90 degrees. And we know that the consecutives add up to 180. And again, part plus part equals 180. Okay, so that's 6 of our 10 characteristics, which means we have 4 left to talk about with the diagonals. So we have to combine all of those together. So let's go ahead and draw our diagonals. Okay, we know from a parallelogram the diagonals have been bisected, so we know we can put those there. But because of a rectangle, the diagonals are congruent, so all of these pieces are the same. We know from a rhombus that they will be perpendicular and that they will bisect the opposite angles. And because they're right angles, that means all of these will be 45. You don't have to think about it here. So let's write down all those characteristics. We said that they bisect each other. The diagonals bisect each other. The diagonals are perpendicular, so we know there's that 9-degree angle in the middle. The diagonals are congruent, so part equals part, which means they're all 4 pieces are congruent, and they bisect opposite angles. And I'm going to just put that 45 degrees to remind yourself, because they're right angles and they get cut in half, they'll always be 45 degrees. And there are your 10 square characteristics. So anytime you're setting up a problem like we're about to do, go ahead and look at each section and ask yourself, what do I know about this information given? More than likely, it's either going to be part equals part, because a lot of things are congruent, or it might be consecutive, they add up to 180, or they might equal 90 degrees. That's basically all we've talked about here.